Well, thank you very much. And I am thrilled that we have two special guests that are hard at work at least 5 days a week on our SUNY campus and making our students feel more welcome and connected to the community. And I had the pleasure of meeting both of them in person for the first time in early October when Francine Francis, who goes by Fran, moderated a terrific Brave Space panel. And oops, I'm just going to pause and mute all. Okay, for now. And and Fran moderated this terrific panel that involved students, professors, other people in the community. And it was great to hear the conversation about why vote, why voting was important to them. Were they registered? Was it, something when they did register, was it something that motivated them to get involved with the political process? So I'm thrilled. I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit about themselves personally, and then share about what they do for the campus community. Fran, just so you know, is the community empowerment coordinator. So I think it's great that we get to know her and she gets to know us because, this is, um, again, we're part of the supportive community, I hope, for the students. And she's also a member of President Agnetti's Inclusive Excellence Council. And again, a terrific moderator herself. But today she's our special guest and she's going to start. And I'm going to ask you to unmute and go ahead.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francine Francis, as Diana shared earlier. I currently work under the direct supervision of Jim, whose name is James Sherman. And in my role as the community empowerment coordinator, I think, and Jim would agree to this, a lot of our job description has changed over the last 6 months or so. So in my role, I work to help develop community amongst residents. So this goes from creating bulletin boards to designing and executing program to promote enriching and diverse programming for our students to participate in. We develop programming curriculums for students, and just really try to and train our CAs or our community advocates to help create enriching environments. And with the tide of COVID-19, it's been more so, how do we keep doing all of this while being safe at the same time? As it pertains to voting, I will say that Jim was the one who helped me register to vote last year. So to give a bit of context, I was not born in the United States and just recently became a citizen. I voted for the first time on Saturday, so that was quite an enriching experience for me. But most of what I know outside of coming and learning from high school is what Jim taught me. And so the significance of voting, why it matters, how to do it, how to go about doing it, learning the difference between absentee and affidavit, all terminology which I have never heard of in my life before. Jim is an excellent teacher and on a number of different fields, but the interest in policies and all of that kind of started with engaging in dynamic and enriching conversations with him. So that's a little bit about me and my story as it pertains to what we do here. So in my work on the President's Inclusive Excellence Council, I serve as the co-chair for that council. And what we do is that we work on strategizing and designing and strategizing policies that would help to preserve the longevity of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion across the campus. And so we have representatives from several different departments working together on subcommittees to help develop plans. I presently work on the strategic methodologies, essentially subcommittee, and I and two other, Chief Levi Ritter and another faculty member work together to start to put pen to paper on what kind of strategies we think would be benefit our campus in order for it to be purposeful and preserving for our commitment to our values. I think that's about all I've got.
Thank you, Fran, very much. And I'm going to spotlight on Jim for a few minutes so he can say hello and tell you a little bit about himself. Go ahead, Jim. Oh, you have to, let me, hold on. I forgot the important thing, ask you to unmute.
All right, I think I'm good. Thanks, folks, for having us. I very much appreciate it. It's always nice to come to do these things, especially since you folks do focus so much on voting, and it's such a nice thing, and that's why for me, like, being here was, I had to be here. You folks do this all the time and are certainly the experts, so I'm excited to be here. Certainly, Fran highlighted, I want to say, yes, education, but sometimes it's just mostly complaining about politics I come in and do. So I was picking up on some of that, but at any rate, thank you, Fran, for the kind words. So as Dan alluded to, my name is Jim Sherman. My call there says James, but I am actually originally from Afton, New York, which is a small town outside of Binghamton. And I came here for college in 2001. My first election I voted in was in 2000. So it was a very chaotic election. But even before then, I was so excited to vote. I've always been very civic-minded. I used to watch presidential debates and all this other stuff as a kid. A lot of other people may have been watching sports or something like that. I was watching presidential debates. So I would put that into the nerd category at this point. But I've always had an interest in politics. I came here then and did my undergraduate degree in political science, where I then got swept up in student affairs here on the campus, and specifically in community living, but was once called residence life. And for me, I've always wanted to be a teacher of some sort, but I never wanted to be in the classroom, and then this job offered me that opportunity. And I think some of the things Fran highlighted is, I get to teach, but not in a classroom. And I do enjoy that quite a bit. And that's what this job allows me to do. I oversee the supervision of all the residence halls and oversee the programmatic efforts, and, with the help of Fran and her colleague, Tom, who help do a lot of this stuff. I always see, even though Fran said, I work under Jim, I always see us as a collaborative effort, in this sense, because I certainly value all of my people that work for me, and Fran is certainly one of those people. And so, for me, I also do this as a pro bono type of thing, but I took up the, some of you may have met her before she passed, but Becky Casper used to do the voter registration efforts here on campus. She gave it up years ago, probably right around 2016, 2015. I took over for her on that moment. And essentially what that means is I oversee voter registration efforts here on campus. And I try to get out the vote, try to educate people on different ways to vote, those types of things, help people with absentee ballots. From time to time, we host events and do, rides to the polls and, those types of ththings. So that tends to be my job as a coordinator. I visit classes and all these other things as well. And then my day job is really just overseeing the residence halls, programming, disciplinary actions, and, things like that.
All right. Thank you, Jim. And I really appreciate the work that you've done to enfranchise our students. And I'm just wondering if we want to share a few minutes, if there's been any issues that you're aware of with our students voting and community members, if you want to weigh in on anything that you've seen that might be addressed, if we're aware of it, that'd be great. Is there any issues that you have heard about?
I have not heard anything as of yet. Sometimes the interesting thing about working with the student body is sometimes you don't find out until after it's said and done, unfortunately. We're really trying to make an effort this time around on the campus to make sure that there is the opportunity to come and voice opinions about, or at least come and talk to us about issues they may run into. The one thing I did get an email from not just recently, and again, I don't remember the context of this, but this was back in 2016. This is what I mean by things coming to us very, very late, was some folks felt, specifically our students of color felt intimidated when they went to the polls, or told that they couldn't vote, or challenged, and those types of things. And again, that came to my attention just today, back in the 2016. And then this person was mostly saying, hey, let's not let this happen again. So that's the one thing I have heard. Anything else besides what Fran, I think, brought up was, a long line on Saturday, but that to me is just a show of enthusiasm, which I really like to see. Because typically here, and as folks know, in the North Country, you're in and out pretty quickly when you go and vote. It's usually not any lines. You're waiting maybe about 5 seconds and then you're in and out. At least that's been my experience here. But that's the only thing I've heard at the moment. We are trying to prep because we know that this particular election is fairly contentious for a lot of people. And there's a lot of feelings mixed into this. So the college is trying to prep for some things to happen in the event that the election goes in either way. It could be contentious for either side. So we're trying to prepare somewhat for that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And, it is such an exciting time. And Clinton County, I don't know if you saw the newspaper yesterday, they had over 700 voters on Saturday and over 900 voters on Sunday. So there were long lines. For Clinton County, that's almost unheard of. I voted Monday afternoon, and it was a piece of cake. And then I went yesterday morning with a friend for her first time as a naturalized citizen to vote. And she was in and out in 10 minutes. So that's the good news. I think I mentioned earlier, my neighbor works the polls, and the only issue that she had was a couple of individuals on one of the weekend days came into the election area wearing something that represented one of the candidates, one, I think, a face mask or maybe a shirt. And they were both asked to change, and one did without an issue, but I guess the other, it was kind of a difficult thing, and he decided to be escorted out instead. But we have to remember that electioneering inside the polling place is not permitted, and that includes us as just normal everyday voters. We're not allowed to be billboards. We can't walk in with shirts that push for one candidate or another. So that's something to spread the word about. So I think we're going to be celebrating a record turnout. So this is the good news in the big picture, that across the country and certainly here in our counties, New York, record turnout could be the headline. But what happens after Election Day? And I am so excited that we have a visit from Jennifer Wilson, who is our Deputy Director of the League of Women Voters, that was able to jump on our phone call. And she did part of a panel presentation last night, and that webinar had over 250 people. But her part was 6 minutes of crystal clear, this is what to expect after Election Day. And Jennifer, are you willing to chat with us? I know I'm asking you to unmute.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, go ahead.
So please say hello, and I will get up your PowerPoint if that's okay. And
Yeah,
if
and while
that's
you're doing that, I will drop in the chat the link to our presentation last night. We had 2 expert constitutional attorneys, professors who were talking all about what's going to happen after election day nationally, as far as, you know, kind of the convening of the electoral college and some of the concerns that people might have over certain presidential candidates, maybe not surrendering the seat. So yeah, let me just drop this in the chat and then we'll be.
and I'm wondering if I can spotlight you somehow. I thought I did, but
If not, that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of text on some of these. So basically what I was covering for this presentation, it was called The Path to the Presidency. So my piece of it was just talking about how this all relates to New York State, because of course, every single state controls their own election. So every single state has their own way of actually counting ballots in general after the fact, and in some states before the fact of election day. So on the second slide here,
okay.
I have some of the New York State timelines in this presentation, kind of talking about, you know, when election day is over, when absentee votes are due by, and when they actually start counting them. So here, if you're like me and you have the panelists or the different people in here kind of drop down, you can hit that little square and kind of get everybody in one little stack there. Oh, perfect. So our early voting ends this coming Sunday, and then we'll have also one single day where if you wanted to vote absentee still, you actually could go apply in person for an absentee ballot, which is really interesting. They'll just hand it to you on the spot. You'll fill it out on the spot and hand it back. And then of course we'll have election day. And our early votes, we don't actually count them until after the polls close on election day. And our absentee votes in New York State, they don't get counted until a week after election day. And part of the reason that we do that is because here in New York State, you are allowed to go vote in person, even if you requested to vote absentee or did in fact vote absentee. And this is partly because our absentee ballot rules are baked into our state constitution, and we prefer people to vote in person. So technically, if your situation changes, the reason why you applied to vote absentee, let's say you were going to be out of town, you were going to be away on business, turns out my business trip got canceled, the state would prefer you to go and vote in person instead if your scenario changes and you are there in person. So they give that little bit of wiggle time for, one, ballots that are postmarked on election day to arrive within that period, and then two, to make sure that we are setting aside ballots of people who also voted in person. So they basically compare the poll books to the absentee ballots that they got in. And if we see, oh, John Smith, we have his absentee ballot, I see he signed the poll book, I'm going to put his absentee ballot aside. We're not going to count it. They don't destroy it necessarily. They do hold on to them for a period of time, but they do set it aside. So November 10th, we'll start to count. And overseas and military voters, they get 6 more days. Their ballots can arrive all the way until the 16th. And yes, we can go ahead to the next slide to talk about some of the new nuance in absentee voting this year. So this year there was some new rules around absentee voting outside of just expanding absentee voting. So anyone could request an absentee ballot using the temporary illness excuse, which was expanded to also include fear of COVID. We also now have a process in place in New York State where you can cure issues with your absentee ballots. And what that means for all of us non-lawyers like me is that if there's some sort of issue with your inner affirmation envelope, which is what you sign when you vote absentee, affirming that you are who you say you are, if there's some sort of issue with your signature or if someone helped you fill out your absentee ballot and there's a problem with their signature, or mostly if they didn't sign, or if they signed but you didn't mark somewhere or stamp somewhere your signature. This is something people with disabilities do. An X can be their signature, or they can have a signature stamp. If they didn't do that, or if you didn't seal that inner envelope, you can remedy these issues. So once your ballot's received by the Board of Elections, within 48 hours, they have to review just that inner envelope to see if there's any deficiencies. And if there is, they must contact you within that period. And then you, the voter, get 5 days to respond to cure your deficiency. And then there's even more timeline here. So now we are allowed to count the absentee ballots. We're getting back any sort of, cure issues. We're getting back those pieces of paper of people signing saying, this is my vote, this is, my ballot, please count it. But now is the sort of second step of the voting process, which is the canvass. And what the canvass is basically double and triple checking our work, making sure that we did not miscount any ballots, making sure that we are auditing our machines, that they were correctly counting the ballots that came in, and then double checking that again to be sure that we have the most absolute complete count possible and that all of the count is correct. So the canvass happens, it starts on November 18th. This is also when they'll start testing the voting machines, just auditing them, making sure that they were counting everything correctly. And then once the canvass is complete, and it really is like a two-step process where they canvass and then they kind of canvass again, the county boards of elections are the ones who perform this canvass. And so they will send the results of the canvass to the state board of elections, who will then certify those results. So it's the board of canvassers, but the board of canvassers is basically the board of elections. It's kind of confusing, but on the last slide, I have a little bit more about what the canvass actually is. So December 7th is essentially the day when we'll have those final results and we'll know exactly who has been elected in New York State, and we'll be able to say definitively that these were the people that we elected. And this is not unusual. I know it seems really scary and everyone expects results on election night, and usually we do have pretty good results on election night. But what's making it really different this year is because we have that week gap between we're going to count absentee ballots, and because we have so many absentee ballots this year, there could be a big discrepancy in what the totals we get back on election night and our actual final results on December 7th. And I think there's one more slide in this slide deck, yes, which just talks a little bit more about the canvass, because this is a very sort of in the weeds kind of thing. But again, this does happen every single year. And these deadlines are included in our state election law. So these aren't deadlines that were pulled out of thin air. These were hard deadlines that were set by the state that the state board of elections must follow. And then once all of the results are in, they send those over to the state secretary of state, who enters them in this like federal database thing that I'm not that familiar with. And that is the process of actually getting results from elections in New York State.
All right. Does anyone have questions for Jennifer? This is a wonderful pop-in visit, so we appreciate you coming in. Let me just see if I can find. Oh.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Ellie.
Yes, go ahead, Ellie.
Okay. My question is, what is the advantage in New York or even in other states of the state waiting to start counting absentee ballots? It seems that it's, I keep thinking it's sort of like a kid getting a little ahead of her homework, on her homework. Why not start early and get a handle on it? I know some states do it. What is the thinking on that?
Yeah, and the main reason in New York State is because we allow people, and again, encourage people to go and vote in person if that whatever reason they requested to vote absentee is no longer the case. And our absentee voting rules are really, really outdated. So in our Constitution, these excuses, those are in the state Constitution. And as we know, the state Constitution is very hard to amend. So they need to have that little break in there to go ahead and compare back to the poll books, the absentee ballots that they got in, and make sure nobody's voting twice. So they really kind of need that time period there. And then it's also a bit to the benefit of the voter, so that if you are going to vote in person, or if you send in your absentee ballot on November 3rd, it's giving you that little bit of time for it to come in on the 10th. So it's just kind of, it's kind of to the benefit of the voter. It's kind of for like archaic purposes, but we're one of only a few states that do this. So it's not super common in other states.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
And I'm just wondering, is there anything else in the works that the league is pushing for in New York State? I know we were successful in pushing for the curing of the absentee ballots and for automatic uh, registration, 16, 17-year-olds can pre-register. Is there anything else that we can look forward to?
Yeah, and so the absentee voting issue, there was first passage of a constitutional amendment to remove the excuses for absentee voting so that anyone can request an absentee ballot without having to provide an excuse. And I think when we get second passage of it, which we're expecting in this coming year, we will probably revisit the state law around when they can start opening and counting those ballots, because it is something that now that we are seeing that, usually we have about 4% of voters who request an absentee ballot in New York State. Very, very low percentage of voters vote that way typically. But now we're seeing people are enjoying voting absentee, and this could be a problem going forward to have to wait to count these ballots.
All right. Well, thank you for your visit. Any other questions from our attendees?
Yeah, I got a question for you, Jennifer. I guess, how are people notified if there is issues with their absentee? Is it a phone call, email? How would somebody know?
Yeah, and that's a great question that I didn't get into because it's like such an in the weeds thing, the whole cure process. But yes, so there is new regulations about the process of actually contacting voters that do have deficiencies, and the emphasis is on phone or email. But of course, we know providing that information to your county board of elections is optional. So they're going to emphasize phone and email. Those are the first 2 points of contact. If your email's bouncing, if your phone number isn't going through, we can't even leave a message, then they'll go to mail and send you a mail notice saying, hey, you have a problem with your ballot. Here's the piece of paper you have to sign saying that it's your, basically your new affirmation. If you're contacted by phone or email, there is an option to do a digital signature. So either they'll email you something and you'll electronically sign it, or you'll take a photo of your signature and scan that in. But there is so much nuance here, because if you applied to vote by absentee ballot through a paper application where you physically signed, you can do it electronically. If you didn't do it that way, if you called to request your ballot or you requested it online, you have to provide a wet signature where pen hits paper and I'm physically signing something that is affirming who I am as a voter. So it gets very in the weeds. Luckily, they have to provide you a lot of information when they contact you about the whole process. So hopefully there won't be that many issues with having to cure ballots. But if you are one of those people who does have to cure your ballot, you will get very, very explicit directions.
All right. And I have forwarded the link to the entire webinar that you were involved with last night. It was excellent. But the last speaker from our national board emphasized the importance of patience. So I just want to stress that please, we need to be patient, let New York State go through its process. And we realize now a little more about it, that it does take some time, but it is for the benefit that we get a complete and accurate count. All right. Any other last questions for Fran, Jim, or Jennifer? We like to thank them for their visit to us today, and we wish them continued success in their roles. And Jim, I forgot to mention when I introduced you that you are the Assistant Director of Community Living and the Voter Services Coordinator for the campus. So again, you guys are doing great work, and it was nice to meet you, and please know that we're here to support your efforts in whatever way we can. So thanks for signing in. We're going to go on with our business meeting. So feel free to stay if you like, but I'm going to take the record button off and wish our guests the best, and obviously a great weekend. And we're all going to be excited about the record turnout, I think. So we'll be celebrating that soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.